up to date and also to refresh your memories of those that have already seen some of the photographs. If you remember, in April of last year, I was able to make 2 visits into the Ukraine, taking food from Romania into the Ukraine for further distribution. Last November was very different. In fact, I was part of a group of 6 that was able to travel further into the Ukraine to actually distribute food and also to do something else, which was absolutely top priority. And this is what in fact happened. If you look at the map of the Ukraine, you can see Kyiv here, Lviv there, you see Donetsk, and Mariupol. If you remember, Mariupol was absolutely obliterated. And here is Kherson, where the Ukrainian army in November drove out the Russian army, and Mykolaiv, again, another town that had been severely raided by the Russian missiles and other incursion activity. And again, the same as last April, I met Pastor Peter here in Bucharest. I flew from Luton to Bucharest. Pastor Peter and I have known one another for about 15 years. And we then drove from Bucharest through Romania, picked up Pastor Sandu at a town nearer the Romanian border. We went across the Danube, about half a mile wide river, across the Danube on a pontoon, and then into the town of Ismail. And in Ismail, we met up again with Anatoly and Mark. These may be names that you remember, at a church called the House of Prayer. They are significant people. Mark is Anatoly's son. He has a brother, Alex, and between them, they have 2 teams of people. And on alternate weeks, they go to Mykolaiv and the Kherson region, taking much needed aid and one important other factor. We traveled from Ismail on the red line to Mykolaiv, and then round the district of Kherson, back to Odessa, and then back down to Ismail. We arrived in the evening on the Wednesday evening. We stayed with Anatoly and Mark at the family home overnight. And then on the Thursday, 6 of us gathered at the House of Prayer. And then we traveled the 1,000 kilometers up to the Mykolaiv region. And here we are. Here's the group. We're in a village at this when this photograph was taken. I think it's quite an important photograph because it does several things. It shows you what we look like wearing our bulletproof vests, and the pouch on the front is a first aid kit, and the first item in the first aid kit is a tourniquet, in case you have to quickly put a tourniquet on to stop you bleeding to death. Before we left Mykolaiv on the morning, before we went traveling, we were given a lot of instructions. Don't touch anything. Stick to the defined paths. Don't pick anything up unless we say it's okay and safe for you to do so. Be careful of tripwires and booby traps. You see, Mykolaiv was still a crucial city as far as the Russians were concerned. Kherson was cleared of Russian troops 2 days before we went. So you can see it was still quite a sensitive area. And the lady in the middle here was the sort of municipal representative from the village where that photograph was taken. Most of the buildings had been completely destroyed in one form or another, no windows, no roofs, etc. And she was reporting back to the local authorities in Mykolaiv on the state of the artists, things that were going on, whether people needed hospitalization, whether they were short of food, and all these sorts of things. The village itself had originally 1,000 occupants. When we were there were 38 left. Absolute devastation. Well, this is where the important factor came in. We were there not only to offer them aid, but we were there to ensure that they knew that because he lives, they could face tomorrow. You try telling that to people who have been completely devastated by the war. They have nothing. And I'm going to show you some of that. I don't want to sound too low and too downbeat, but this is the facts. And the images that you've seen on the television, you can believe what you see. We arrived at this church in Mykolaiv around about 6:30 in the evening. It was a terrific drive. They only have 2 positions for the accelerator pedal. Pull down, foot on the floorboard, or off. There was nothing in between. Well, when we arrived, they were having a church service. It was down in the cellar of the church because the rest of the building were full of cardboard boxes, and I'll show you what those cardboard boxes in a moment. The service was still continuing when we arrived, but after the service, the pastor left, and this man here and 2 ladies served us a meal on the table that they were using to serve their communion from during the church service. Their hospitality was second to none. Unfortunately, they'd made little parcels like ravioli with bits and pieces in, all made of wheat flour, of course, and of course, with me being celiac, couldn't have that. So I lived on mashed potato and cheese for 4 days. It's surprising how you can survive under all sorts of circumstances. There's nothing clever and strong about that. It's what was there, and that's what we had, or that's what I had. But on the wall, inside, downstairs in the cellar, was that. Anybody like to tell me what it says? For God so loved the world, etc., etc. 3:16. You didn't need to know the translation because it automatically tells you what it was. John 3:16. These are the people that we were dealing with. Round the table, this is Pastor Sandu. Pastor Sandu was a pastor in the Ukraine for 20 years. He had his own church, came back, and he's now a pastor of a church in the south of Romania. This is Mark, the leader of the group. On the end there is Alex, who spoke good English, I was pleased to say. He's also Ukrainian. Pastor Peter, who's from the Sudan, but been in Bucharest for 20 years. And David, who also is Romanian. He's from a town called Ploiești. What an international group we made. It's just unbelievable how the Lord brings people together from such diverse backgrounds and from different areas of the world. Well, after we'd had our meal, we then loaded the 2 VW people carriers with these boxes. They're from an organisation called Rapid Relief Team. You see, I thought we were going to take apples and bananas and onions and potatoes and whatnot from Romania to distribute. No, they had other plans. So on the Thursday evening, after supper, we started to load the vehicles with these boxes for onward distribution. And here we are on the Friday morning now, all packed up and ready to go with all the kit on, helmets if they were available. I wore my hat, of course. for identification purposes, you understand. And then we set off. And en route, last time I showed you some of the roadblocks that we encountered. Well, you know, you've seen all of these in different formats on the television over the last nearly 12 months now. Some a bit naive roadblocks, but vehicles that had been shattered and left where they were. This is what we saw when we went to the first village. Apartment buildings, completely obliterated, no roofs, rooms shattered, as you can see, and people just left as it was and got away as soon as possible. You see, when the bombs are dropping, bearing in mind that the night that we stayed in Mykolaiv, 5 bombs went off in the town. The windows in the house where we were staying were rattling, and you could feel the vibrations of the bombs. So they weren't all that far away. But here, they had bombardment after bombardment, way out in the sticks, absolutely pointless. It was achieving nothing other than destroying people's lives. I'm sorry if I'm getting a bit positive now, but that's a fact. They achieved nothing by doing this. They were hoping to destroy the people's courage and confidence that they would give in, but not the Ukrainians. And here we are in 3 different locations distributing these boxes. I forget how many little villages we went in, but typically a typical village consists of 1 road and maybe half a dozen houses on either side of the road, and you just drive through it, literally. And this is where we were. People got word that we were coming because we'd been to one village, and then mobile phones being what they were, oh, they're just on their way going this direction, maybe they're going to stop for you. And then people would come. This lady here is of particular interest to me, and she's stuck in my mind, and I know she's been in Pastor Peter's mind as well. But most of the time that we were with her, and in her village, she was in tears, and we were there probably for an hour, hour and a half. She didn't stop crying, and Peter and I recognized that there was a problem. We didn't speak any Ukrainian, but Alex came with us and translated for us, and she said that she hadn't heard anything from her son for about 8 months. This was last November. She didn't know whether he'd been captured, whether he was still fighting and couldn't communicate. The battery on his telephone had gone down and wasn't able to recharge it, or whether he'd been killed. She didn't know, and she was fearful for her son. What do you do? We both put our arms around her and we prayed for her in English. She didn't have a clue what we were saying, but you could see the depression that she was under and the pressure that she was under just sort of melt a little and put a different complexion on her. Thing is that we were trying to give them some hope. Because he lives, we can face tomorrow. This line was very true to me. Because he lives, all fear has gone. The 6 of us didn't have any fear at all. We went with complete peace about what we were doing. But the possibilities were there, not as keenly as they have been in recent weeks, but the possibilities were there. We were very cautious about what we did and where we went. And then, as you can see in the top right-hand photograph, we were around the people and praying for them. Mark, who was the leader of the team, was very keen to give them a simple gospel message as we went through the various villages. Well, this is what we saw. As I've mentioned to you, roofs were collapsed, shrapnel and bullet wounds all on the faces of the buildings, no windows, nothing. Cars burnt out, a whole range of things that were obviously no longer normal. This lady I mentioned to you, she lives in an underground bunker. It was built in 1952 to protect against a nuclear invasion. Can you believe that? In 1952, that was the sort of beginning of the Cold War, and they started to build bunkers to protect the people. 5 people share that bunker with her. However, can't resist temptation, can you? So I picked up some bits of shrapnel. It was okay. They were cleared before I touched them. And but these pieces of shrapnel were found all over the place, as were armaments. This is an unexploded bomb. The Ukrainian army had unscrewed the detonator off the top there, which is why there's that brown ring. I don't know anybody that's got good eyesight, but in the background there's a little white line. That is an unexploded ordnance. And the Ukrainian says, we don't know what it is at the moment. We don't know how to deal with it. Stay clear and we'll come and blow it up when it's opportunity. This was way out in the village. What purpose was there in dropping a bomb there? Served no purpose at all. And everywhere we went, there were these bullet cases, spent bullet cases, I have to add, and they were all over the ground in most of the places that we visited. And this is what you're looking at. On the left-hand side, it's centimeters. On the right-hand side, it's inches. So they're fairly chunky bits of metal. I was very tempted to put a couple in my bag, but I don't think the customs man in Romania or the customs man at Luton Airport would have been very happy about that. But typically, this is what we found. We spoke to a lot of people. I've got, I don't know, 300 or 400 photographs, and I've just chosen a few so that you can see the type of devastation that's caused. This elderly gentleman here lives in the house behind the blue gates. And this is what's behind the blue gates. His house has been destroyed. He's found some timbers from somewhere to board up the windows to keep the cold wind out. His car was absolutely destroyed. The garage or lean-to that he had was blown apart. He lives in that place on his own. He's the only one in the village. But fortunately for him, there are other people in local villages that come and keep an eye on him. And these 2 guys turned up and started to tell Pastor Peter about this old man living there on his own. But they do pop in from time to time and look after one another. Totally destroyed apartment block. He lives downstairs in the cellar. No electricity, no running water, because he's cooking outside, but he has got a means of heating through a sorber, which I shall show you later, and the fumes from bits of piping that he's been able to find or make bits of tubing. There's sheet metal that he's bent round with bits of wire on, and then he does his cooking outside. Lives on his own, like the other 38, dotted around. I wanted to go and have a look to see so that I could show you, but I find it very difficult to take photographs even of these people. because I feel as if I'm patronizing them. But I have to do it in some respects so that you can see for yourselves just exactly what the situation is like.
Started war February 24. First of all came tanks from the road
Из Херсона на Николаев.
from Kherson to Nikolaev.
Там несколько полов там их перекрыли, это приезжают градами. И вони все.
Начали они стрелять, едут и стреляют по домам.
Мирно там стреляли. И оттуда мирно не прибили.
Едут по мирным жителям. Мы начались.
Here to the first day of the war, from Kherson to Nikolaev came Russian troops with few columns of technical, some equipment, tanks, vehicle with Russian troopers. They came to this village and shoot to people. And fired some houses, and they. They was there, here, near this village.
Русские сегодня заезжали.
Они только поехали, и пытались назад на Херсон, их там встречали, но они стреляли.
Последня колона йшла, доїхали, і от там за мостом стали. Там їх накрили градами, вони розвернулись, я поїхали.
Ну, а потом стояли они за стеклом и стреляли именно по домам, по людям, по скотине у нас куча.
Людей тоже много. Людей.
Ні, ще якось не так, а на тому куди там є.
Недавно.
Приїхали в історії, прийшли, аби голова лежить, сміли, всі. Вони також.
Russian troops were on the road, main road, this village, which one goes to Nikolaev. The Russian troops was on this road, in the terrain, maybe around maybe 1 kilometer there. But there was no killed in these houses. There just was one, and second one like this on this road. And then after our Ukrainian military troopers met them and was fighting there. And then after this, Russian troops were running out to the end of this village, and they made like some holes, like for equipment for us live there, and they were there at the end of this village. And during already 8 months, they shoot all day, every day to this village, fight this village, and to other part of this Nikolaev region. They killed a lot of people, animals, destroyed a lot of houses. Finish. Да, мы видели, да.
In some respects, you don't need the translation. You can pick up the gist of how they suffered for, well, since February the 24th until the middle of November. When eventually the Ukrainians overcame the problem of the Russians, and the Russians retreated, and then they retreated out of Kherson. You see, this lady was stood outside her house, and she was by the gate, and she didn't beckon us, but she was indicating an invitation to go and see. So I went in and praise the Lord for a reasonable mobile phone, and I did some photographs and some video recording. And as you can see, the outside of the property was quite attractive. They've made it very, very nice. They just finished refurbishing it in February. They bought some new furniture. They bought a new fridge. She was so pleased that they've been able to afford a new fridge, because obviously they wanted to make things reasonably comfortable, but not a lot to do during their latter years. Difficult to tell how old they are. I wouldn't like to put a figure on it. That was the outcome. House is completely destroyed. There's no point in repairing it. It just needs knocking down. Why would you rebuild it in an area that is completely devastated? Who's going to do it? How much will it cost? Where's the money? You know, it's just too many questions. So this husband and wife live in that shack that they've been able to recover. Again, no running water, no proper heating, no sanitation, no electricity. However, it's not all bad news. You see, we left the Mykolaiv and Kherson region at about, oh, I don't know, 4 o'clock, 5:30 on the Friday afternoon. And then we travelled to Odessa. Now, Odessa has been under severe bombardment. And this is Main Street, traffic-free zone in Odessa. And go walking down there leads to the waterfront. It was very, I don't know, warm, and there was a nice glow, good atmosphere at about 11 o'clock at night. But there was a purpose in going there, you see, because not far down the road was a KFC, and the lads wanted something to eat. Again, there was nothing there for me, so a cup of coffee and about 4 spoons of sugar sufficed me for that meal that evening. But you see, there has to be some relief. These guys are going every 2 weeks into that situation. And then we left Odessa early hours of Saturday morning, about 5 o'clock, to travel back to Ishmael. And on the way was the first decent meal that we had, and that was ham and eggs in a roadside motel. You see, there's plenty of food. The problem is distribution and getting it to the people that need it, which is what Mark and his teams achieved. So there we are. Well, I don't know what time of the day it was. We had to get back to Ishmael for about 9:30 on the Saturday morning. But again, it was a truly international event. And it's been going on this week. You see, Pastor Sandhu has been back. And today, he took 19 sets of anoraks, boots, hats and gloves that Interark had purchased in Romania to distribute to 19 children that had been brought together as a result of the loss of their parents in the war. So even though we are, I don't know, let's say in round figures, 2,000 miles away from Mariupol and Mykolaiv and Odessa and these other towns, we are still able to utilise the good services of people there to undertake work on our behalf. So we were back in Ishmael for about 9:30. And you ask yourself, why did you have to be there for 9:30? Well, on the Thursday before we left to go to Mykolaiv, we went to a local supermarket. It's about the size of Costco's. It seemed enormous to me, and which encouraged me really, because the shelves were full of food. There was no problem with food. We filled 25 large shopping trolleys with pasta, flour, sugar and rice, tins of fish, and tinned olives. It cost a lot of money, paid for on my Barclay card. But unbeknown to me, Mark and his father and his brother had visited some of the refugees that were resident in Ishmael. Ishmael is about 100,000 residents normally. 25,000 Ukrainian refugees had been accommodated in that town. Well, you know, you just imagine, what are we in Coventry? Something like 360, 370,000 people. Imagine 25% of our population coming in from outside in one hit. How do you accommodate them? Well, they distributed the people to private homes. They converted empty office accommodation into small rooms for people to live in. They took over hotels, etc., etc. And the church wanted to make a contribution. So they organised 2 services on the Saturday morning. One at 9:30, yes, we got to be there, and one at 11. 600 people came, and Interarch, which is an absolute miracle to me, was part of the contribution so that everybody that came went away with a food parcel. That's why we went to the supermarket on the Thursday, because on the Friday, teams of other people from the House of Prayer put together these orange plastic bags. Everybody that came had a food parcel. Everybody that came with children had an additional food parcel for the kids. And then there was second-hand clothing that they could go and help themselves to. What a privilege that was. What an unexpected privilege. Praise God for people who have got the initiative that can step out and do something. They can't do everything. You know, when we first started to look at how we could help in the Ukraine, and we were able to fund activity in Poland and in Moldova, I coined a phrase that this was a starfish project. And if you know the story of the starfish, you know that the little boy picked up one starfish off a seashore, covered in them, and put it back in the water. And Dad says to him, "That's not a lot of help." And the little boy, after a little while, says, "Well, it was to the one I put back in the water." Now, that's where we are. We can't help with millions of pounds. We can't help hundreds of thousands of people, but we can help a few. And that's what we'd like to do. So again, there was another international activity. However, we came back on the Saturday evening. Pastor Peter and I arrived back at his apartment in Bucharest at about 10:30 at night. 10 o'clock on the Sunday morning, I was speaking at his church. Just before I spoke, Peter said to a young lady, "Come and sing us a song, will you?" What did she sing? "Because he lives, I can face tomorrow." That's chorus has followed me now for 14 odd years, because every time we meet in the children's home in Bangalore, we all stand in a circle and we sing, "Because he lives, I can face tomorrow. Because he lives, all fear is gone. Because I know he holds the future, and life is worth the living just because he lives." The greatest thing that we took to the people in the Ukraine, in addition to the food, was we took them the love of Jesus Christ from 3 different countries. They were aware of his presence through us. And you could see how happy they were that somebody from the outside world was still interested and thought about them. No matter who we were, we could have been anybody at all. We didn't need to be somebody posh. We didn't need to be somebody poor. We could have been absolutely anybody. But they knew that we were thinking about them. The lady in the red knew that Pastor Peter and I were concerned for her, even though we didn't speak the language. That's so important, so important. The kids that Pastor Sandu has taken these close to, I'll probably never see them. I'd have loved to have been with him. Well, I would have gone if he just said, yes, there's room for you in the bus, come. I'd have caught a flight and gone. However, it doesn't end there, because the week that I was back in Bucharest, in Romania, there were still things to do. And we went to visit a little complex on the outskirts of Bucharest, where there is a Roma community. And round the outside of this little courtyard are one-room buildings. And in those one rooms, families live. Here's a group of the kids. Pastor Peter's telling them a story because he speaks very good Romanian. This bright light here is an outdoor kitchen, and that's what it is. That's where many of them do their cooking, do their washing in all weathers. We went into several of these single rooms and saw how people lived, and in the single room was typically a bed and a cupboard and occasionally a television. Not a lot else. One thing that was missing was heating. They had no heating at all. And I mean that, there's nothing. Outside this door, at the bottom photograph, is a little lean-to covered in plastic sheeting and tarpaulins that they've borrowed or otherwise obtained from elsewhere. A little shelter where the lady did her cooking on a 2-ring gas burner and had a washing machine. How that was plumbed in, I really didn't want to investigate. I didn't want to investigate where the water went to either, however. So I said to this lady, what you need is a sorber. And she said, yes, yes, you know, I know 1 or 2 Romanian words. And she said, yes, there's a hole pointed in the ceiling, a hole in the ceiling. And I said, how many of those do we want? I said to Pastor Peter. He said, it looks as if there's 3 families that could do with them. So this is a sorber. This is a portable one. Typically, in a Romanian house, you have a chimney breast, which goes into the room next door, so that you have a hole in the bottom of the chimney breast in which you put wood and burn it. These thermal bricks that are then tiled heat up and it acts like a big radiator. Well, in a 2-roomed house, that radiator, being the other side of the wall as well, heats 2 rooms at the same time. Well, they got 1 room, and so we went to see these families on the Friday night. On the Saturday afternoon, Peter and I went to the local B&Q, they call it Brico, and we bought 3 of these. They were delivered on the Sunday, and on the Tuesday they were installed, because we bought the flue pipes to go in here. I think it was 6 meters or 6 feet of piping and elbows as well, so they could go out through the wall if necessary. So 3 people in no time at all enjoyed winter heating. And I've had a text message today from Jetta to say that she's found a source of wood pellets. You know, you can go to Sainsbury's and buy little briquettes that you can burn, etc. Well, she's found a source of those sort of things in Bucharest, and she was going to visit them later on today and place an order with them so that these people don't even have to find their own fuel to burn. We will provide the fuel for them. And here they are, installed, up and running. Nothing very spectacular. All I know is that 3 families in downtown outskirts of Bucharest have now got winter heating. Can I challenge you to go home and turn your central heating off for 3 days and see what happens? We put ours on about 3:45 this afternoon. But isn't it marvelous how the Lord gives you these potentials? There's usually a time of prayer, Andy, at the end. I hope you've been encouraged tonight by what the Lord has set before us to enable us to help in the small ways that we can. I can't wait to go back. I hope to go in February, but I'm waiting on Peter and Sandu to say, yes, there's room for us. I don't want to go as a passenger, but I'm not much help. You know the situation. If I can be there to encourage them. This last trip that Sandu is making currently, we have funded the costs of that because there's diesel to purchase, there's food for them to have en route. There's a contribution towards their upkeep because while they're going backwards and forwards to the Ukraine, they're not earning anything. So, you know, we have to be sensible about this. Can we pray for these special people? Sandu, who lives in Medjugorje, in the south of Romania, Pastor Peter and his wife Jetta, who live in Bucharest, Anatoly and Mark and the team in Ishmael, that they are able to continue and the Lord will keep them safe as they serve him and as they journey around in the Ukraine and elsewhere. Can we pray for these people now, please? Thank you.